This video is part of a multi-part series about me trying to set up NixOS as a daily driver. In the last video we installed NixOS itself and also Hyprpanel with NVIDIA support, and that's basically it. In this video we continue the setup by installing programs that you might actually want in a daily driver. Before I continue with the NixOS setup, I will just customize some Hyprpanel comments. These things are highly subjective, so I think I will skip over most of it. If you are interested in my setup specifically, I will link to the GitHub repository in the description. Next up is customizing the terminal, so I will need some nerd fonts. I'm using Firefox on the right side as a reference. By the way, I'm very sorry for all dark mode users for flashbanging you like this, but I fear this is gonna be like this for the rest of the video. I am going with VSCodium, and the installation is pretty easy, as you can see by the code piece here. Installing the font is now just a quick rebuild away. From the top of my head I couldn't remember what the config file for Kitty was called, so I had to quickly Google that. Okay, it's kitty.conf. Obviously. Anyways, my next challenge was that I didn't remember the syntax of the kitty.conf file. So after careful study of the documentation, I conjured up a spell which I hoped would set the right font to the terminal. Of course, it didn't work. Luckily, I've learned of the existence of Kitten, which is a terminal user interface to set the config for Kitty interactively. With that, I could easily set the font to VSCodium. As last customization for the terminal, I just increased the font size, so I hope it's a bit easier to see in the video from now on. So far, this is a really basic setup. The next step to make it a lot more daily drivable for me would be to have an IDE like, for example, Codium. So let me look it up and I'll be back once I've finished some reading on how to install it. Okay, I'm back. It wasn't too complicated. Apparently you also manage the extensions to VS Code from the config file, so that's very consistent. Now, the first time in Codium I immediately noticed that the extension I wanted to have installed is not actually installed. So I seem to have fundamentally misunderstood how extensions work with NixOS and Codium. This doesn't bother me too much right now, because apparently I can just install extensions the normal way. Naturally, I create a small Python file to see if everything works as expected. Right, I guess I never installed Python. The NixOS recommendation is then to install Python like this. They say that Python is not meant to go on your system or home configuration, but instead into a project-specific shell.nix. At this point I don't know what shell.nix is, and also this looks kind of complicated and like a lot more effort than just using a virtual environment or a conda environment or something like that. So I will keep researching for a bit longer and hopefully find a more suitable solution for myself. On Reddit I find a quite promising answer, which employs something called flakes to allow me to create virtual environments. Setting up the virtual environment like this requires the experimental features nix command and flakes, but it works quite well so far. It seems as though the random code I borrowed from Reddit comes equipped with UV as a package manager, so that is very nice. And of course executing Python scripts now also works. So now I can finally install the Python packages that I need for my work which are mainly Qiskit and PySCF, so a quantum computing and a quantum chemistry software. And then I expand the little Hello World test code to test that I can actually employ the installed packages. And that means yes. After restarting Codium, the language server also works now. So in my book, the development environment is now barely usable and it's time to move on. And with moving on, I obviously meant get immediately sidetracked. You see, I was fascinated by the way this Reddit user made Python work on NixOS with such ease, and I wanted that kind of power for myself, so I started researching what these flakes are. But after a bit of research, I still don't have a really good grip on it. Flakes seem to somehow encapsulate or modularize your code while maintaining functional purity, but I don't know how that will help me. For now, I will just note down that flakes exist and hope that I can get pretty far with just copying and pasting and praying that stuff works. After all, it's my first day with NixOS. What is a lot clearer to me, however, is how to permanently enable flakes in NixOS. Anyway, after this quick deviation, I wanted to continue setting up my system. One thing you will notice that is lacking entirely is any kind of bar. I don't really expect much in terms of this bar or panel, but it would be nice to at least see the clock. So since I'm using Hyprpanel and I've heard about Hyprpanel, I'm gonna try to install Hyprpanel. And as it turns out, Hyprpanel is installed via a flake, so this previous excursion is actually already worth it. Well, I say worth it, but you already see me in the background struggling to install it correctly. But after long last, Hyprpanel works, and I actually really like the default look already. I will just check that it works after a reboot, just to be sure. Okay, phew. Now I'm just missing some small programs which I don't think will pose much of a challenge, and then I'm ready to test this as a daily driver. The last of the packages I ended up installing are Zotero, which is my citation manager, Blender, which is a 3D software. Wo-Fi, you probably know, is this menu here to run any application I search for. OBS Studio, with which I'm recording this here right now. KeePassXZ to manage my passwords. And finally also Tuner with some additional features enabled, so you can run Tuner and it works. One thing that I would like to tackle in the next episode is that my GPU doesn't seem to be available in the user space. I mean, it works with Hyprpanel, but for example here in Blender I apparently have no GPUs that are compatible with CUDA or optics or HIP or anything. I have an NVIDIA GPU, so I would expect the CUDA GPU to show up here. The same thing happened also with OBS, where I wanted to try with hardware encoding and the GPU was not available, and I think it would be very nice to solve that issue. But in the meantime, I think this setup is okay for doing some productivity work. I also changed from Bash to ZSH, but as you can see, it's all very plain. Also the Wo-Fi, I don't know, it's very plain everything, so if possible I would also like to try and rise everything a bit in the next episode, but this is low priority. This is everything I have for this episode. As I mentioned in the beginning, my configuration is gonna be on GitHub, but I am sure you will also figure it out on your own since you're smart people. Bye!